You're listening to the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Jeff Brantley.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in episode 89 of the Man in the Cage podcast. I am your host, Jeff Brantley. I'm glad to be back with you today on a Monday edition of the show. A fantastic Monday edition of the program ahead for you today. Jam-packed wall to wall. I hope you had a great time this past weekend watching all of the fights, because it was a busy weekend of fights. We had fights on Friday night. We had fights on Saturday night. I hope you enjoyed watching all of them. We're going to discuss all of them today. I know I had a great time this past weekend watching all of them and having a good Monday as well. Well, I'm having a good Monday, but it would be a better Monday if, and as you can see here, wearing my Knicks basketball shirt, it would be a very good Monday today. A great Monday. If my Knicks had won last night, and if my Knicks hadn't been, if I hadn't had my heart ripped out of my chest in the final moments of Game 1 with the Atlanta Hawks last night. For those that saw that, my Knicks' first playoff game in about 10 years at Madison Square Garden, first playoff game in 10 years in general. They're playing the Atlanta Hawks. They're winning the game all the second half pretty much. They're leading even late in the game, hitting some big shots. Looks like the Knicks are going to win. It looks like we're back, fully back here. And then, damn you, Trae Young. Just damn you, Trae Young. I tweeted it out last night on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley. Damn you, Trae Young. Trae Young stabs a dagger through the heart of, we'll say, Knicks Nation, the heart of Knicks fans. Trae Young stabs a dagger through it with just buzzsawing through the Knicks defense late in those final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter last night of Game 1 of the series. Oh my God, it would be a better day today if the Knicks had won last night, or even if I hadn't had my heart ripped out of my chest like that. What can you do, I guess, right? What can you do? Game 2 coming up on Wednesday. I'm feeling good about it. But this is an MMA show. This is a boxing show. This is a combat sports show, I promise. I'm not going to talk basketball all day, although I will share my misery with you, especially being a Knicks fan. I will share my misery with you constantly right here on the Man in the Cage podcast. Hey, tweet at me, at Jeff_Brantley. If you hate the Knicks, or if you like seeing other people be miserable, then tweet at me. Make fun of me. Make fun of me for being a Knicks fan. I've been made fun of my whole life for being a Knicks fan. It's not going to stop now, certainly after Game 1, so tweet at me, at Jeff_Brantley. But we do have a lot coming up on today's show, a lot of exciting things coming up. My guy Jason Hagholm from BTC Fight Promotions, as well as The Scrap and MMA Chronicles. He's a journalist over there for those guys. He's going to jump on with me today. You can follow him on Twitter, at JHagholm1. Jason Hagholm, he's going to jump on with me in part 2 of the show today. He's going to give his thoughts on UFC Vegas 27, as well as Bellator 259 from this past Friday, and sprinkle in some other things as well. We're going to go over a boxing question, some other things throughout the MMA world right now, so you want to stay tuned. You want to hear that. My guy Jason Hagholm jumping on the show in part 2 of the Man in the Cage podcast today. And then in part 1, of course, as always on a Monday, going to go over my 5-minute topics. I'm going to put 25 minutes on the clock, go 5 minutes through everything there, and then at the end of the show today, I'll give my parting shots after I bring Jason on. So a jam-packed show today, a lot to go over. You want to hear my thoughts on UFC Vegas 27 and on Bellator 259 and some of the other things going on throughout the combat sports world. We also had Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez, a great matchup in boxing from this past Saturday night as well. Have some thoughts on that. Is Josh Taylor into the top 5 pound-for-pound conversation now? Going to go over all of that on episode 89 of the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter. I've already mentioned it a couple times, at Jeff_Brantley. If you want to follow me on Instagram as well, have some content up there all the time, at Jeff_Brantley as well. Go check out the website for the show, maninthecagemmma.show. All of our videos up there from YouTube, all of our latest episodes. There's even some merch up there. I'm not wearing my shirt today, but I also have some swag for the Man in the Cage podcast. You can grab up there, t-shirts, socks, sweatshirts, all that good stuff. Go check it out, maninthecagemmma.show. You can also support the show. If you love the program, if you love what I'm doing, I'm able to do it because of all my supporters out there, and I love all my supporters already. So if you want to go support the show further, you can go hit the top, on the top right-hand corner of the screen, hit the button. You can pledge as little as $1 a month, all the way up to $10 a month. I would appreciate it. Thank you very much to everybody that does that already. Go check that out. And then also, I want to shout this out. I almost forgot about it, which would be bad, actually. Anyone that's ever been in radio, media, TV, anything really. I mean, even if you've never been in media, you know this would be bad, right? To not mention the sponsors of the show. I almost forgot about it just now. But we also have a new sponsor on the program that I'm really excited to bring on. You can go check it out as well on maninthecagemmma.show. There's a sponsors tab there. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, you can click the button in the bottom of the page and become a sponsor of the show. But if you can go check that out right now, all of our sponsors, Bovada, Patreon, Anchor, and then now I'm proud to, and I actually mentioned this on my YouTube Live. I did a YouTube Live from this past Friday reacting to the UFC Vegas 27 weigh-ins, giving some final thoughts on that Bellator 259 card before it kicked off. But DBK Media, they're a new sponsor of the show. I'm very excited to announce that. DBK Media handling all of my videos, a lot of my content. DBK Media, if you're an upcoming business, if you want help with your website, if you want to help with social networking, all that stuff, you want to go check out DBK Media. You can go check them out on the internet at dbk.co. Also check them out on Twitter at DBK Media. They're great guys. You want to check them out. They're a new sponsor on the show. I only bring, as I said, sponsors onto the show that I believe in, that are great companies. DBK Media is one of them. So go check them out right now. Proud to announce that on episode 89 of the podcast. And again, if you go to maninthecagemmma.show, there's also a link up there on the sponsors page, a logo for them, DBK Media. You click on that logo, it'll take you to the website as well. So go do that right now. And then, of course, go check us out on YouTube. As most of you are watching this episode right now, you are on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Man in the Cage MMA and Podcast YouTube channel. That way you can get all of the latest notifications whenever a new episode drops like this, or if I do a live video, which I'm going to start doing those more and more, especially every Friday, going to make it an appointment thing for everybody that Friday expect. Even this week, there's no MMA cards this weekend. I'll get into that at the end of the episode today, but there still is some combat sports, and that's why I love this show, and that's why I'm so passionate about this show, that I, of course, love mixed martial arts. But I'm also a boxing fan. I love the fight game in general. We're going to talk boxing at the end of this week. So I'm going to jump on the live at the end of this week on YouTube or on Instagram Live, maybe both of them. Maybe we'll get Facebook in there, all that good stuff. Maybe we'll jump on Periscope on Twitter, right? We're going to get all of that going, and I'm going to be on a live every single Friday, and I might even talk some boxing this week on that live. I might not even. I'm going to talk some boxing coming up later this week on that YouTube Live. So go check me out every single week there, and you can do that by subscribing to the YouTube channel. That way you get those notifications. We also have some cool EA Sports UFC 4 simulations we do for every single UFC card, usually the main event, sometimes the co-main event or more if there's more than one title fight. We simulate those every single week. They're a lot of fun. Didn't have a chance to do my commentary this last week as I was busy with the Bellator card, but normally I put some commentary on them. It's a fun thing. We also drop those on YouTube, so go check it out. Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast on YouTube, and there's a link in my bio, the Linktree bio. You can find that YouTube channel there as well, so subscribe to that. And then if you're more of the old school version, if you want the audio, if you're in your car, driving around, that's how you listen to the show, is through the audio version. You can still get us everywhere, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get them, guys. Whatever platform you listen on, click the follow or subscribe button. That way you get the latest notifications there as well. All right, everybody, that's all the details surrounding the show. I don't think I missed anything there. I know there was a lot today, especially with a new sponsor on the show, but had to get all of that out. I'm psyched up. I'm jacked up. I want to get into all of these topics today, starting with Bellator 259, and then move down the list here through UFC Vegas 27 into that Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez card, and then we're going to bring my guy Jason Hagholm on in part 2 of the show for a good amount of time here to talk about all of this stuff that we saw from over this past weekend. All right, everybody, let's put 5 minutes up on the clock and get this thing going. And just real quick, a quick shout out though before I get into my first Bellator 259 topic. Shout out to the Bellator PR guys over there. They do such a great job giving access to the media every single fight weekend, constantly before and after as well. Had a chance, and many of you saw this on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley, as well on Instagram at Jeff_Brantley. Had a chance to jump on all of the Bellator 259 post press conferences the other night and ask a few questions. Actually asked a question to Danny Sabatello, Leah McCourt, as well as Hannah Guy after she beat Valerie Loureda. Had great access to all the fighters. They do such a great job, the Bellator PR guys. Something that I'm going to be moving forward to do more on the podcast here as I look to grow it more and more. You know, I was in radio for 9 years, covered a lot of teams, covered a lot of different sports, Major League Baseball, NFL, all those things, dealing with PR guys, going to press conferences, asking athletes questions, all those things. Looking forward to bringing that angle to the podcast as well moving forward. Then I'm going to try to jump on all of these Bellator virtual sessions and some of in-person things as well once we get more normalcy back to our society and we're starting to have more in-person events. But going to try to bring that to everybody, every single podcast. And the Bellator guys, again, a shout out to the Bellator PR guys, did such a great job at that this past Friday night. All right, let's get into it though. Again, Bellator 259 from this past Friday. Cris Cyborg, she defeats Leslie Smith in the main event of that one via knockout in the 5th round over Leslie Smith. Credit to her, and I'll just get that out of the way real quick. There's not too much of an angle on Leslie Smith outside of she is a tough person. She is so tough. I mean, she stood in there for 5 rounds, took Cyborg's best shots, got rocked here and there, was able to make it to a 5th round, and almost made it the distance of Cris Cyborg. She could almost tell her kids that someday, and everybody else out there that, hey, you know what? I went 5 rounds with Cris Cyborg. She did go 5 rounds, but she didn't make it to the bell in that 5th round. The Leslie Smith angle, she's just so tough. I mean, that's a badge of honor right there. That is a great job, and that's a credential thing for Leslie Smith to show her toughness as a fighter to be able to make it to the 5th round with Cris Cyborg. But moving on to that, and obviously the bigger picture here for this fight and what's next for Cris Cyborg, and what kind of Cris Cyborg are we seeing right now? Because I think that's a major talking point after this fight that, yes, she went through Leslie Smith. Yes, she was a buzzsaw in this fight. Was it expected? Yes, she was expected to beat Leslie Smith. I said she was going to run right through her. I actually thought it would be even a little easier. Again, credit to Leslie Smith. But I think the talking point after this fight needs to be is this the best Cris Cyborg we have ever seen? Because she still has, the striking chops she's always shown off. She showed that in this fight. Clean striking, powerful, everything, right? But she's showing a few more things late in her career now, though, that we hadn't seen earlier in her career. She's starting to use more wrestling. She's starting to use more of her jiu-jitsu. We even saw a scramble exchange in this fight against Leslie Smith. Not to say that Cyborg's not an athlete, that she hasn't used her, grappling before. She hasn't used some of her other mixed martial arts talents. But she's starting to use them more and more now. I mean, she's coming off of a win against Arlene Blencoe in which she got her first submission victory of her career. Now she goes out there, she looks comfortable grappling with Leslie Smith, using that wrestling, and then she's also showing some better patience now. The Cris Cyborg against Amanda Nunes rushed right in, got caught, got hurt, and then rushed in again and got caught and got hurt. We're seeing Cris Cyborg be super patient now, setting up her shots, knowing that she has 5 rounds, knowing she has a lot of time to go to work, knowing that she has the time to use her wrestling now if she's going to use that, knows she has the time to set up all of her shots, save some of that gas tank, and go out there and finish the fight eventually. And if the opportunity, if the window opens for her, she can close it. She's showing all of that now. So I think a legitimate question now is, are we seeing the best Cris Cyborg? And that's just another credit to her career, because we've seen many great versions of Cris Cyborg, whether it be back in the Strikeforce days or even some of the time she had in the UFC. We've seen a dangerous Cris Cyborg where she'll just run through opponents. And even the first Leslie Smith fight, just buzzsawed her, walked her right down, used her head movement, took her head off the line, got her out of there. We've seen some excellent versions of Cris Cyborg. But I honestly think this is the best version we have. I would say yes to that I think this is the best Cris Cyborg we've ever seen. She's putting everything together. And that's what makes this run for her super impressive, that she's putting that grappling together now. She's putting that patience together now with that striking. That makes her a complete package. To me, that means that she's a fighter right now that can compete with anybody in the world. And she's always been able to compete with anybody in the world. But when I say is she able to compete with anybody in the world, of course, I mean, will she be able to compete with Amanda Nunes, who is the only woman ever all time that has given her, I don't say any issues, because, some other women, even Leslie Smith here, she presented some problems in the fact that Cyborg had to dig a little deeper into the gas tank, right? She had to go 5 rounds with her. She couldn't gas in that fight, obviously. But major issues, right? Amanda Nunes is the only woman all time that's ever done that to Cris Cyborg. So could she compete with anybody in the world right now? Meaning, could she beat Amanda Nunes again? I'm not going to say yes or no. You know what? Actually, I won't cop out like that. I will say right now that I do believe that Cris Cyborg would give Amanda Nunes a tough fight right now. I think she would make that second fight a little tougher. I do think maybe Amanda Nunes would be just a tad bit more than Cyborg right now, but I think it would be a lot closer. And would I count Cyborg out in that fight right now, the way she's fighting? No, I would not. I would give her a great shot. And that's why she's, she's always been, but even more so right now, I think the best in the world. And she is the complete package, and I think this is the best Cris Cyborg we've ever seen. And, I'm going to throw this question at Jason Hagholm in a little bit here and see what he thinks about it. But I've seen this on Twitter this past weekend, a lot of people debating this of, who is the GOAT? Because Amanda Nunes, after she beat, and I know I'm going a little over the 5 minutes here, but Amanda Nunes, she beat Cris Cyborg, of course. So she was crowned that GOAT. She had that GOAT crown, right? And I still think she has it. But I think it's a fun conversation to still have of, could you make a case now for Cris Cyborg to be the GOAT? Because they're not going to, and this is where it gets tricky, that you would have to have a second fight. And that's why this GOAT conversation is frustrating to me, that you'd have to have a second fight between these two women in order to really determine that. One fight's not enough, especially now that we're seeing the way Cris Cyborg's fighting. Maybe the second fight goes different. So you'd have to have a second fight. You're not going to get that right now, obviously. They're both in different promotions. They may never fight ever again. So that makes this conversation a little frustrating, but I think it's still a fun one to have because the resume of Cris Cyborg, what she's doing now, I think she makes a case for herself. I'm going to see what Jason says in a little bit here, but I think that Amanda Nunes is the GOAT still. But honestly, if Kayla Harrison comes from the PFL to Bellator and Cris Cyborg's able to beat her in some fashion, maybe even run through her, knock her out, stop her, I think then I would say, hey, Cris Cyborg elevates herself just even, it's already close to the GOAT conversation, but I think she would make it even a little bit closer if she were to be able to beat a Kayla Harrison with Cris Cyborg in that GOAT conversation. That's how close I think it already is. The only separation is that loss for Cris Cyborg, and she might never ever get a chance to avenge that. We'll see. But definitely a fun conversation everybody was having out there on Twitter the other night, and we can continue to have it here. So Cris Cyborg is going to continue to run through everybody in her path, including maybe Cat Zingano next, which could be an interesting fight. When I say interesting, I mean a name brand, right? It's not going to be an interesting one in my opinion, especially the way she's grappling now. I think she runs right through Cat Zingano as well. Zingano's had her best days behind her as well. So it'd be interesting from a name perspective, but she's just going to keep running through opponents until she gets a Kayla Harrison, and then maybe someday again she faces an Amanda Nunes. Real quick, wild card matchups. I'm going to go Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Wild card, baby. Wild card for me, though, against Cris Cyborg. We already mentioned Cat Zingano. We already mentioned Kayla Harrison at some point, but she's got to leave the PFL. But I'd be interested to see a Megan Anderson matchup in Bellator, and I might even be interested to see a rematch between Felicia Spencer and Cris Cyborg in Bellator. I think Cris Cyborg beats both of them, but hey, two more opponents that would be very interesting that Bellator could go sign right now. The UFC's featherweight division, women's featherweight division, going away. I don't think it's going to be around anymore very soon here. So Norma Dumont, she beat Felicia Spencer the other night. I'll get into that a little bit in a second here, but that division going away, I think there could be some opportunities for Bellator to bring some of those women in there. Keep replenishing that Bellator featherweight division. Keep giving Cris Cyborg opponents, that way that division doesn't die, because that's something Bellator might have that the UFC doesn't have shortly here. We'll see. Again, the UFC hasn't commented on it, but for all intents and purposes, that division's going away. But another win for Cris Cyborg the other night on Bellator 259. Another great win by her, and we'll see what's next for her inside the Bellator cage. All right, let's move on to topic number 2 now. I'll put 5 more minutes up on the clock. If I go a little shorter here, great. One of these, that way I can get caught back up here. But, Bellator 259 the other night, the rest of the card, co-main event, Darion Caldwell, he falls to Leandro Higo. Higo came in over the limit the other day at the Bellator weigh-ins. He came in, I believe, at 137 pounds for that bantamweight division fight. So he did not make weight, but again, he gets another win here, actually. He avenges his loss. The first time these two met between Caldwell and Higo, he avenges that with a decision loss. I think the bottom line here is, in Leandro Higo, after the fight, calling for bigger fights, calling for a James Gallagher fight, I think he should get that. No doubt Higo should. He needs to get that professionalism, he needs to start getting back on track with that, though. You can't be missing weight every single time. It's unacceptable, and frankly, it's a little annoying when you hear him talking so much, bragging so much after wins against guys like Darion Caldwell where he's not making weight. Listen, guy, yes, that's a good win, a very good win, but go out there and make weight next time. But should he get, big fights moving forward? Yes, but I would make him, Bellator's got to be careful and say, listen, guy, you're going to have to make weight, okay? Or we're going to have to move you up, or you're not going to be here anymore because you got to be making weight to be professional. So I think Leandro Higo should get some big fights moving forward if he can get that under control. For Darrion Caldwell, though, which is even more interesting to me because I thought Caldwell would look fantastic on Friday night. He goes to a new gym. He's at Sanford MMA. He's training with guys like Michael Chandler, with Nick Lentz, as he talked about at the media day last week. He's training with others. He's got Henry Hoof there. This is going to be a good transition, right? And then he comes out and arguably looked worse than we've ever seen Darrion Caldwell. Did he have moments? Yes. Did he use some of his wrestling? Yes. But he looked in between on the feet with his striking. He looked with his wrestling like he wasn't busy enough on the ground. I know Leandro Higo kept his guard closed, did some of those things to stunt some of the excitement, some of the things that Caldwell was able to do in that fight. But still, you expected to see a little bit more from him, and you didn't. I think that's only because, and again, we'll see, we don't know what he's doing in the gym. He's got to take it seriously here. But if he is taking it seriously and going to Sanford MMA, making that move, I think he is taking it seriously. I think eventually we will see a payoff for him. It might have been a little too soon to see those. And maybe especially myself, was being a little naive that I thought that would be an immediate change for him going to Sanford MMA. Some improvements, some immediate ones. It might take some time for him, obviously, because he didn't have them the other night. Now, if he has another fight down the road here, another 1 or 2 fights, and he's still looking the same, then what can you do at that point? But I'm not giving up on him yet. I think the camp change, I think eventually he will get some things down. He's just got to break those old habits, like a lot of us do. He's got to break those old habits. He's got to get some more action on the feet. He's got to use his striking a little bit better, set everything up a little bit more, and then the wrestling, get a little busier on the ground, use some different techniques, not get caught with those guillotines as much. But I expect Darrion Caldwell hopefully to improve over his next 1 or 2 fights with that camp change, but definitely disappointing from this past Friday night. Rest of the card, we also saw Austin Vanderford. He beat Fabian Edwards. Vanderford gets cut at the end of the fight, very bloodied. Outside of that, though, it was and by the way, that cut with that elbow from Fabian Edwards came from bottom. Vanderford dominated that fight with his wrestling. Once again, used his explosiveness, uses his athleticism to wrestle Fabian Edwards, gets the win that way. Showed off maybe some improved striking, but still some to be desired there. Overall, it was just another really good performance from Vanderford. I know some were bored by it, but again, that's if you don't like wrestling. I know he didn't do a ton of things, but Fabian Edwards is a tough opponent. I liked what I saw from Vanderford. That was a good win. And I think he's close to getting a middleweight title shot within Bellator, obviously, here. When it's going to happen, I don't know. Scott Coker, after the fights, was talking about Gegard Mousasi, John Salter. Maybe that fight happens later this summer. Maybe it doesn't. I thought it was already going to happen, or that was pretty much set in stone. But Scott Coker seemed a little in between on it, so we'll see. But Vanderford very close to that. I do want to see him get another fight or 2 first, though, before he gets that. I think he needs to improve a little bit on that striking, or a guy like Gegard Mousasi might give him some issues. Can he bank on the wrestling? Yes, but at some point, your takedowns are going to be stuffed, and you're going to have to go to work on the feet a little bit better. And that's what I want to see improve from Austin Vanderford. But the kid, he's always improving. I mean, he seems like he's a gym rat. He seems like he's in there. I'm excited for the future of Austin Vanderford. So that was a good win on Bellator 259 as well. Last one I'll talk about, then get out of here just real quick. Valerie Loureda. And there was actually a lot of performances on Bellator 259. I mean, Alexander Shabali, he opened up the card, making his Bellator debut. He got a win. Danny Sabatello, the Italian gangster, goes out there, upsets Brett Johns with a fantastic performance there. I mean, I could talk about that for days. There was also some other performances on the card. Grant Neal beating Tyree Fortune. So many of them. But last one I'll talk about a little more extensively. Valerie Loureda, she suffers her first MMA loss to Hannah Guy. Had the chance to talk to Hannah Guy, as I mentioned earlier, talking to some of those fighters after her fight at the Bellator 259 post-press conference. Asked her about some of the armbar attempts she was going for, because she used her grappling against Valerie Loureda. She was getting hit a little bit here and there, maybe even hurt here and there from some of those boxing combinations, taekwondo stuff from Valerie Loureda. But she was able to bank on that grappling, go to the ground, attack the arm a lot. And that's what I asked her, were you looking for those arm bars? Or was that just something, mid-fight that just was there for you to be had? And she just, she basically said she just goes for all submissions every single fight. And again, go to my Twitter, go to my Instagram at Jeff_Brantley to check out that video, and I'll keep posting it out there. Also up on the website, maninthecage.mma.show. But, Hannah Guy, a major upset there, and especially because of the hype train coming in for Valerie Loureda, that everything Loureda has going for her, with herself trying to model herself as a model, then as a, the fighter that she is. She had all that hype coming in, and then Hannah Guy goes in there and derails that in a major way. She showed Valerie Loureda, while she still has some promise, has a lot of things to work on, especially that grappling. In fight IQ too a little bit, and I'll get to that maybe just in a second, but that grappling was a major issue for her. Went to the ground multiple times, getting eaten up a little bit on the ground. She showed, and this is probably the biggest thing you can say about Valerie Loureda in that fight, and I've seen a lot of people making fun of her over this past weekend for her loss, and a lot of that's brought on by what she brings to social media and the image she presents. So I understand a little bit of that, but I do think it's a little unfair though that Valerie Loureda, she lost, but you can't really take away her toughness though. To make fun of her completely, she showed a lot of toughness in that fight though. A lot of fighters would have tapped from a lot of those armbar attempts. I believe she's even posted now that she has some ligament damage in her arm. She showed some toughness in that fight. She showed some heart that she stayed in there. A lot of those armbar attempts, she was a little slow stepping over on them, but she stood in there. She tried. She kept trying. I think that's something that when I look at a fighter, especially a young fighter, something that you really want to see in somebody, it's the heart, it's the toughness, it's all of that. And that's what Valerie Loureda does have. So is she going to be, a world champion someday? She'd probably say yes. I'm going to say I have no idea. But one thing we do know Valerie Loureda has is toughness, though. And she's going to keep trying. She's going to have more fights. She's going to keep trying to improve. She's at a good gym at AT&T down in Florida with all the fighters that are down there. So we'll see what improvements she can make. But she's still, the hype train got derailed for sure there. That Hannah Guy out-grappled her. Really put her in some positions that she wasn't ready for. And also fight IQ real quick, and I'll wrap it up, get to the next topic. But fight IQ is a major issue too for her in that fight. That Loureda kept trying a bunch of spinning stuff, even her corner in between rounds 2 and 3. I tweeted out, and other people have the video too of her corner basically telling her to knock that spinning bleep off. All that good stuff. Good cornering there actually by the American top team down there for Valerie Loureda. Bad fight IQ. And then she goes out and she tries it again in the third round. And some puzzling stuff, but she showed some toughness. We'll see what happens for Valerie Loureda in the future, but a massive upset, and congratulations to Hannah Guy. That's a massive win. She showed a lot of promise there. She's going to have to work on her striking a little bit for sure, but the grappling's there. And if she can get some better boxing, some better head movement at least, even to the point of what Austin Vandervoort does, she could be an issue in that division as well with some of that grappling she was showing off, and now she's going to continue to improve as a grappler too, I'm sure. So big win for Hannah Guy. Overall, a good event for Bellator 259, a fun event with a lot of big things happening, and I'll make sure I'll be on the post fight press conferences and the media availability coming up for Bellator 260. That's coming in a few weeks here, June 11th, I believe that is, so around that date. Few weeks here. I'll make sure I'm covering all of that for you guys on Bellator 260, which also has some great matchups coming up, but a fun weekend for Bellator there. All right, UFC Vegas 27, that was from this past Saturday. We'll move into that now. Main event of the evening, Rob Font, he gets a decision win over Cody Garbrandt. 2 judges had it wide as it should have been. One judge, Derek Cleary, I don't know what he was watching. I don't know if he was watching the Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez card, or if he was watching the NBA playoffs. I have no idea what this guy was watching. He had a 48-47 for Font. He still had the right guy, but it was not that close. Rob Font dominating this fight against Cody Garbrandt. Went out there, used his length, kept him on the end of his jab, out-jabbed him, threw power shots when he could. Had a little bit of issues, especially early on in the fight. Cody Garbrandt did use some of his wrestling, getting takedowns, but Rob Font used his jiu-jitsu. He used some of his grappling game to get back to his feet at times, though, and also attacked a Kimura at one point to get back to his feet. Did enough there to get back standing so he could keep going to work with that jab, with that length on Cody Garbrandt, and took care of him fairly easily. Garbrandt here and there may have, gotten in a good shot on him, but it was not a Cody Garbrandt performance that we're accustomed to seeing. It was not him really using any power punching. It was him backing up on the cage most of the time. Kept looking for, a shoulder roll. He kept looking for just a big power right off the cage like he did against Rafael Assunção. It was very head-scratching for Cody Garbrandt. Backing up. Reminded me of Tyron Woodley a lot, that, just staying on the cage, throwing right hands, just trying to throw power shots. Very, 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 I don't, and I'll get into the Garbrandt side more in a second here, very puzzling. But for Rob Font real quick, fantastic win, obviously, against a guy who does have power. He fought so smart in this fight, using that length, using that jab, and then showing the patience as well, that a lot of fighters would have rushed in and tried to finish Cody Garbrandt there. And with someone like Garbrandt, that's the worst thing you can do because of the power he has, that he can counterpunch with you. His hands are still very quick. We didn't really get to see him as much in this fight, but a lot of that's because of the fight IQ. And I talked about Loureda's fight IQ not being there on Bellator 259. Rob Font's fight IQ was right there. It was perfect in that fight, that he kept him at his length, was patient, didn't rush in for the finish, any of that stuff. Just kept backing Cody Garbrandt up against the cage, landing on him, able to get the decision victory. He hurt him here and there. Here and there he looked like maybe he was going to finish the fight or land, was one or two big shots away from putting Cody Garbrandt away. But at the end of the day, fought smart, gets the decision. Big win for Rob Font. So what's next for Rob Font? I think that's the biggest question now, that in that bantamweight division, you have at the top Aljamain Sterling, who's also had neck surgery recently. That's something we can just put on the shelf here as well, that Aljamain Sterling has had neck surgery, so who knows when he's going to fight again. He's the champion right now. And, of course, he gained the title over Petr Yan in a very controversial way, that he won that fight and took the belt from Petr Yan. So Yan and Sterling at some point is probably going to happen, or Yan has a great case to fight for that belt once again. So that fight could be up there, but again, when's Sterling going to fight? Then the next guys in the division, you have Corey Sandhagen also up there, ranked number 2 in the bantamweight division right now. He's taking on TJ Dillashaw later this summer, though. Dillashaw coming back from suspension, everything he's been through with steroid allegations, all that stuff, being unclean, all those things as a fighter. Now he gets Corey Sandhagen. That's a big fight as well, because what we've seen from the past from TJ Dillashaw. So that's a massive fight for probably a number 1 contender spot. Whoever wins that probably is going to face the winner of Yan Sterling, or again, if Sterling isn't able to fight, if they allow Yan to fight somebody for the interim title, maybe it's the winner of Sandhagen Dillashaw. We will see. But Rob Font factors somewhere into there. He factors somewhere into that picture. I don't think he deserves a title shot right away, but I do think Rob Font should hang out for a second, relax, keep going back to the gym, keep working on his craft, and then, honestly, I think he should get the loser of Corey Sandhagen, TJ Dillashaw. And whoever loses that bout, I think Rob Font should be next to face that guy. If TJ Dillashaw loses, it should be Font versus Dillashaw. If Sandhagen loses, it should be Font versus Corey Sandhagen. And then that firmly puts him in that discussion then of, if he wins that fight, then he gets a title shot. So Rob Font's very close. He's probably a fight, again, or two, probably just a fight away from getting that title shot, especially after beating somebody as good as Cody Garbrandt, or at least the resume Cody Garbrandt has shown in the past. And we'll move into that now as I get near the end of my 5 minutes here of Cody Garbrandt and what's next for him. And ultimately the question that I'm going to ask today, I'm going to ask Jason this: is Cody Garbrandt finished? Is he done? At least as an elite bantamweight. He's probably going to get fights still. I don't think he's going to retire, but is he done? Because the Cody Garbrandt we saw was very, very, very puzzling. Backing up, didn't let his hand speed go, wasn't setting up any of his shots, wasn't throwing any of his boxing combinations, wasn't allowing himself to get going ever. Backing up, looked a little bit, I don't want to say intimidated, but a little bit hesitant at times. I think he even said that after the fight, that he was fighting himself. You can see that. Very, very head-scratching. If there's any positives to take out of this fight from Cody Garbrandt, it's that he didn't get knocked out, which in the past he's been made fun of for having no chin. He ate some shots. He was backing up for a lot of it and wasn't necessarily in the pocket in massive exchanges, but he was getting hit a lot. Didn't get knocked out. That's a positive. He also seemed patient again, and he used his patience. Now, he needs to work that in between. He needs to get in between that, show a little bit more aggression with that patience, though. He needs to blend it together better, because what he did the other night's not going to be good in any division. You talk about him going down to the 125-pound division, any of that stuff like he was talking about before versus Figueiredo. Doesn't matter, though. He's going to have to blend some of that stuff together if he wants to continue to be relevant, and maybe even some of that wrestling he showed. Be patient with it, use it better, all that good stuff. But is Cody Garbrandt finished, in my opinion? No, I don't think he's finished. I think if anything, now again, this is the case, and maybe I'm taking a little bit of a cop-out, but if in his next fight Cody Garbrandt looks the same, if he shows a lot of the things we saw from the other night, then absolutely. But I actually agree with what he's saying. He looked like he was fighting himself. I think that's a wake-up call for him, that moving forward here, don't worry about the chin, because it's all right, okay? You showed yourself, you proved to yourself a little bit. Now, don't go out there and necessarily go and get in a firefight, but stay busy. Set up your shots better. Use some of your wrestling again. Keep working on the cardio. I think that's a big thing, too, here, that Cody looked very tired after the second round. He's coming off of an injury and COVID-19 that really struck him hard. I think he's got to keep coming back from that. And I think if he does, I think we'll see Cody Garbrandt return to a similar form of himself in which we saw him versus Rafael Sunsao or maybe others. Do we see an elite version of Cody Garbrandt again? I can't say that right now because what we've seen is him be different. And even the patience now of Cody Garbrandt, if he starts to be that patient, too a patient, then I don't think we'll see an elite version of Cody Garbrandt again. But, he definitely had some positives, mostly negatives. Moving forward, is he finished? I don't think so. I think he's going to have a performance or two here and there that maybe you say, hey, that's a flash in the pan. But otherwise, though, do we see him hold the bantamweight title again? I don't think so. I mean, there's nothing but killers in that division now. I think he's going to move down to 125. Figueiredo's a killer too, though, so I'm not going to say he gets past him. So does he ever have the belt again? If you had asked me that, I would say probably not at this point. But is he finished completely? No, I think he's going to be very relevant. I think he's going to have a performance, too, at the end of his career here or moving forward in his career that reminds you of the old Cody Garbrandt. But I don't think he'll ever be a champion, no, at this point, inside the UFC, at least the UFC, unless he goes somewhere else. Maybe he could capture a title there. But as far as the UFC is concerned, I don't see Cody Garbrandt ever capturing a title there, though, now. All right, moving along to topic number 4 here, and I'm going to kind of combine these next ones a little quicker here, get through this one pretty quick here since I'm over on the other topics. But the rest of that UFC Vegas 27 card, some of the notable things we saw. Of course, Carla Esparza, she gets the win over Yan Xiaonan in the co-main event. Bludgeoned her. Mauled her. Great performance by Carla Esparza. You love to see that from somebody who, not only winning the fight, but going out there and finishing the fight and making a statement that I want the title shot. I need the title shot. You cannot ignore me with the title shot. That's what Carla Esparza did on Saturday night. That she went out there and mauled Yan Xiaonan, who's very good. And Yan Xiaonan, I'm not going to even really get into that, but I'm very high on the future of Yan Xiaonan. She's got some things obviously to clean up. The ground game's a major issue. But she's a good fighter, though. And Carla Esparza went out there, dominated her, took her to the ground, used the wrestling, got in some dominant positions, then started using that ground and pound. Impressive from Carla Esparza, and I do think she should get a title shot next. I think her versus Rose Namajunas should be something the UFC looks at later this summer. I think that would be a massive fight in the strawweight division. I think it'd be a fun fight to see if Rose can avenge the loss that she had so many years ago against Carla Esparza for that very same title. So I would love to see that Esparza versus Rose Namajunas. Would be a fun fight. I think Carla Esparza earned that. Rest of the card, UFC Vegas 27. Jared Vanderaa, he got a good win, a bloody win. He was cut in that fight a little bit from Justin Tafa. Went out there and looked pretty crisp on the feet. I liked what I saw from the big man there. I wasn't expecting actually to see that from Vanderaa, but he went out there, looked crisp on the feet, did a very good job there. Rest of the card, Felicia Spencer, she loses to Norma Dumont. That's notable, Felicia Spencer, because she'll be getting cut soon. Norma Dumont, though, she looked good. She looks like she's made a lot of improvements, wants to move down to 135. Date with Amanda Nunes at some point could be on the horizon, whether it be for the bantamweight belt or for, let's say, if the UFC does want one more featherweight fight for Amanda Nunes, maybe that featherweight belt could be on the line between her and Norma Dumont as well. So a big win for Norma Dumont there as well. And then maybe the only other notable, there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through all of them again because I'm trying to shorten this a little bit. I've tweeted a bunch of thoughts out the other night on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley. If you want any more thoughts on any of those fights, UFC Vegas 27, tweet at me at Jeff_Brantley. But the Edmund Shabazian versus Jack Hermansson fight that opened up that card, Edmund Shabazian loses once again. I don't want to say, it was one of those losses where Hermansson first round was getting pieced up a lot, and it looked like Hermansson might be in some trouble. Second and third round, though, Shabazian had some issues with the grappling, had some issues with the wrestling of Jack Hermansson, slowed down a little bit. Again, toughness, you see it all there, though. The will, he kept trying to fight, kept trying to do some things. Did show off some poor fight IQ, though, again, at times. That Shabazian at one point tried to drop down in a guillotine after he stuffed the takedown on Hermansson. What are you doing, Edmund? Do not go to the ground with a grappler. Do not go to the ground with a guy like Hermansson who wants you there. He wants to be on top. Do not pull guillotine there. So that was puzzling. So Edmund, he had his moments, had some puzzling moments. Overall, moving forward for Shabazian, though, I think Shabazian's going to be one of those guys in the future that you look at, and if he makes the proper adjustments, I could see him being a Charles Oliveira at some point where you say, hey, you know what, he suffered those bumps in the road, but now he's UFC champion or he's contending for it. He's got to make some improvements again. He's got to improve the way Charles Oliveira and some other young fighters have after facing adversity. But that's where Edmund Shabazian is at this point now. He's got to make some improvements. But if he does, He's got a lot of talent. The striking's there. Almost had Hermansson in some terrible spots in that first round where he might have been able to finish the fight. So Shahbazyan, we'll see. He's got to make him though, and he's going through a really bad rough patch right now. But for Hermansson, the other side of it, big win for Jack Hermansson. I said it all week last week. Questions were going to be answered in that fight. Who was going to answer the questions? Was it going to be Shahbazyan coming off a loss or Jack Hermansson? Hermansson answered that though. Striking is still rough, but the wrestling and grappling side of what he does, submission side of things that he does, very good. And he showed that against Edmund Shahbazyan there, grinded him out in the second and third round. He's got to work on that. He's got to work on that striking a little bit. If he could, and I'm going to use this as not a standard, because I do think he's got a little bit of a way to go as well with the striking. But Austin Vanderford and some of these other guys who are showing that they're going to use the wrestling, and that's primarily what they're going to be. The striking's there. It's like okay, but it's not there really. But they have enough of it to get into those takedowns, get into the wrestling and jiu-jitsu side of things. You got to be able to do that. And Hermansson he accepts way too many bad exchanges on the feet that you're going to get knocked out doing that. You can't do that. That's one thing you can't do. If you're not going to be a great striker, you cannot accept positions like that. And Hermansson does that way too much. But otherwise, if he could figure that out, he's going to be a problem for everybody. His wrestling, his cardio, his jiu-jitsu, all there. So still a good win for Jack Hermansson. He's got a little bit to improve on, but if he can fix some things here and there, and maybe even if he doesn't, definitely going to be a fun fight and a tough fight for a lot of guys inside that division. So we'll see where Jack Hermansson goes moving forward. But he answered the question on Saturday night, coming off of that loss, gets back in the win column over a big-name prospect in Edmund Shahbazyan. All right, topic number 5, and then I'm going to get to my guy Jason Hagholm here. Going into the boxing world, Josh Taylor, he beats Jose Ramirez the other night for the junior welterweight belts. A good fight between both of them. Josh Taylor scored a couple knockdowns in the fight over Jose Ramirez. Ramirez, though, late in the fight, really turned it on a little bit, found an extra gear, tried to finish the fight, tried to get back into the fight. Overall, a fun unification fight between Josh Taylor and Jose Ramirez. Taylor, though, as I said, he gets the win, though. He gets the unanimous decision win. The only thing you don't like about that performance, and I've seen some others out there, and I'm not trying to hate on anybody. I'm not trying to say anything bad about his performance, but late in that fight, he took some rounds off. He seemed like he was trying to coast to that title. He seemed like he knew he had it in the bag, which he did. You want to fight smart, but he seemed like he took some rounds off at the end there. You don't want to see that necessarily in your champions, but the rest of the fight, he looked fantastic. I mean, was landing some beautiful shots, showed off that ring generalship I talked about last week, sharp punching ability, knocked, as I said, Jose Ramirez down twice. Kenny Bayless, we can get into that a little bit, the referee in the matchup. Maybe one of the knockdowns somewhat responsible on him, but I'm not going to get too much in the referee today. I mean, I tweeted it out the other night. I have no idea what Kenny Bayless was doing. That was a terrible reffing. When the referee is that bad, I don't even know what to say. I mean, Kenny Bayless was getting in the way at times. There was other times he was way too involved in it. He's had some other performances like this, Kenny Bayless has, where you're like, come on, Kenny, get out of the way, buddy. Get out of this. You're making this too much about yourself. But again, I'm not going to go too much into that. So that was a little head scratching. But the performance itself from Josh Taylor, very, very good. And now the question is, number one, what's next for him? And actually, I tweeted out the other day after the fights on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley to send in your thoughts, your questions, any of that good stuff. And Glove Talk tweeted at me at Glove_Talk, asked me about who I think is next for Josh Taylor. And I'll get into that in a second as well. And then he also had another question I'll get into at the end of the show here. But at least for right now, I'm going to answer my own question I threw out there as well. Josh Taylor, does he break into the top 5 pound-for-pound discussion of boxing? I think he should. I mean, when you face somebody as good as Jose Ramirez, which there are a lot of fighters out there, there are a lot of analysts, there are a lot of guys on boxing who will say they thought Jose Ramirez is the best fighter in that division. And Josh Taylor went out there, knocked him down twice, looked dominant at times. I think Josh Taylor deserves to be in that top 5 pound-for-pound discussion. He's already at number 9 on the list, according to Ring.com, Ring Magazine. I think he should be in that top 5 discussion. At least the discussion, or maybe number 5. I'm not going too crazy, not saying he should be number 1 or anything, but Josh Taylor, should he break into that or close to it? Yes, he should after that performance against Jose Ramirez. He should be near that top 5 pound-for-pound discussion in boxing after a performance like that versus Jose Ramirez. And then I'll get to Glove Talk's question to me of who I think he should fight next, and that's, should he face Teofimo Lopez or should he go and face Terrence Bud Crawford? Both of them massive fights. Now, Teofimo Lopez has a fight coming up June 19th to defend his titles. Bud Crawford also lining some things up for himself. But down the line here, who do I want to see him face? If I could say both, that is definitely the answer. I want to see him face both. And a lot of people would say Terrence Bud Crawford right away, and that would be a fantastic fight. But I'm actually going to say I would prefer to Josh Taylor to maybe face Teofimo Lopez first. If Teofimo wins, and of course, I think he's going to, but we'll see. We'll preview that fight down the line here. But what's going to happen in that fight will dictate if he faces Teofimo or where Lopez is at. But if Teofimo wins, I think Teofimo Lopez should face Josh Taylor. And the reason for that, I would say, is that Teofimo Lopez he's starting to establish himself as a name brand. He's starting to establish himself in more than, if you're a diehard boxing fan, all these guys. But, the layman's fan, the casual fan, Teofimo Lopez starting to establish himself as a name. Josh Taylor is definitely starting to do that now after this win the other night. Both these guys seem on the same level, though. They're trying to establish a name for themselves. Both guys that are very exciting, have a bright future in boxing. That's why I want to see that fight first, because Terrence Bud Crawford has been a pound-for-pound best for years. He has been who he has been for years. He's the biggest name out of all three of them right now, in my opinion. Now, maybe you could argue Teofimo's gaining some notoriety here, Josh Taylor, especially after this weekend. But I would like to see Josh Taylor step in with Teofimo Lopez first, and then whoever wins that, or if Josh Taylor's able to beat Teofimo, then maybe you go face Terrence Bud Crawford at some point, and that would be even a bigger fight if he's able to go beat a guy like Teofimo Lopez. So I'll answer that question that I'd love to see him go face Teofimo Lopez next if I had the choice, Josh Taylor. But if he faces Bud Crawford first, not going to complain at all about that. That'll be a fantastic fight, and it was a good fight this past weekend over Jose Ramirez. And again, Ramirez late in the fight, credit to him, stepped on the gas pedal a little bit, tried to get back in that fight. Jose Ramirez, he shouldn't be ashamed by that loss at all. That was a tough fight, good opponent. I might even say in the future maybe he avenges that fight, or at least steps back in there with Josh Taylor, has a second chance again. So nothing to be ashamed there for Jose Ramirez, but nonetheless, Josh Taylor, a great performance in that title fight this past Saturday night, Top Rank boxing card this past Saturday night that we saw, which was a very good one, as I said. And going back-to-back with the UFC Vegas 27 card, definitely an entertaining card from Top Rank Promotions. All right, that's my 5-minute topics. I know I went a little over there. That's all right. Had a lot to go over today with so many fight cards this past weekend. Tweet at me at Jeff_Brantley. Same thing on Instagram. If you have any comments about anything I said, disagree, agree, have more thoughts, more comments, I'll shout you out like I did Glove Talk, and I'll answer his other question at the end of the podcast. If you have anything like that, tweet at me at Jeff_Brantley. All right, everybody, let's get into my next guest here. Same things I went over, but I want to hear his thoughts. You've heard all my thoughts. You're probably tired of hearing my thoughts now after going past the 30 minutes here. But let's get Jason Hagholm's thoughts on everything. A busy fight weekend, one of the best in the business at covering, and you want to go follow him on Twitter at jhagholm1. Let's go out to him right now on Skype and let's see how Jason sees things and how he saw things from this past weekend in the combat sports world. Pleased to welcome onto the show now Jason Hagholm. He is the host of the Jason and Gentleman podcast. He's also an MMA journalist for the MMA Chronicles and The Scrap. Additionally, again, you guys know this, he's the voice of the BTC Fight Promotions and the Kitchener Rangers. BTC Fight Promotions, by the way, guys, does return coming up on June 5th in Vancouver, BC. Jason will be on the call of that. Excited for that. Excited for BTC Fight Promotions to get back to things. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at jhagholm1. No matter the fight card, guys, again, Jason always tweeting about all these cards, LFA, Bellator, whatever it is. He's tweeting about it, in especially BTC Fight Promotions coming up, so you want to follow him on Twitter at jhagholm1. Jason, it's been too long, man, since I had you on. I'm glad to bring you on today. We have so much to talk about from this weekend. How you doing today, man?
Jeff, always fun to get back with you, talk all things mixed martial arts. I'm doing well today as we record this on Monday. It's a holiday here in Canada. We got a Queen Victoria's birthday, so everyone's, soaking up the nice weather for a change and, getting spend some time with some family right now.
That's awesome, man. And you have the Blue Jays hat on today. We were talking about it a little before I brought you on, and it is a holiday in Canada. And we will get into MMA in just a second here, but I always like when I bring you on to get a quick synopsis of something Canadian, okay? Because I know Canada. I love you. I love our fellow Canadians, but sometimes I don't know some of these things. So just explain to me this holiday real quick, because I have no idea what it is.
I guess it is Queen Victoria's birthday. So obviously Canada, a country part representative of the Commonwealth. So it is her birthday. She was born almost like 200 years ago today. So we still celebrate her birthday and get the day off. I guess it's a holiday in the UK as well. So we will take that. In Quebec, it's another holiday. I'm not sure of that, but they have their own holidays that kind of mingle in. But it's nice. Now we're kind of in the trend of our holidays are the week before the American ones. I know you guys have Memorial Day next weekend, and then we'll have Canada Day, and then you'll have the 4th of July, and then kind of lines up around Labor Day, I guess.
All right. I dig it, man. I dig it. Happy birthday to her, and enjoy the time off. Canadians, and as you said, in the UK, all of our British fans that listen to the Man in the Cage podcast. So, again, happy birthday to her. And I like to always get that from you. Some of these Canadian traditions. My next, maybe in 2 years, I'll have them all down every time I bring you on, Jason, at some point here. And maybe we'll get the Blue Jays back to Toronto sooner or later here. But we are going to talk, as I said, MMA today, a bunch of it. We had so many cards coming up. Well, not coming up from this past weekend. UFC Vegas 27, Bellator 259. We'll start out with UFC Vegas 27, though, Jason. And, we had an interesting main event going into it. We had Cody Garbrandt taking on Rob Font. A lot of questions about Cody Garbrandt coming off of an injury, off of having COVID himself. Definitely didn't look himself in this fight. Looked very poor against Rob Font. I have some other questions pertaining to this fight in a second, but just real quick, Jason, what were your thoughts on this fight? What did you see from Rob Font? Do you think, what could you think Cody Garbrandt have done better in this fight? Those types of things.
I don't know if Cody could have done anything better. It was just so much what Rob Font did. Like, he used his jab well to set up his other punches and really push the pace. And Cody was just looking to kind of have that, same effect he had against a Sunsauer. He was trying to get off the fence, shoulder roll, and then crack him with a big one-hitter quitter, which that can work once in a while. But when you're looking for a knockout, as if you follow combat sports, every time you look for the knockout, it's not going to come. The knockout comes naturally. Did Cody not look great? Sure, but I think it's, like I said, it's more what Rob Font did. Like, Rob Font is a guy that's really turned it on in his career. Obviously, the Garbrandt win, then Marlon Moraes, like, he's now on a 4-fight win streak. And some of the guys he's beaten, like, you look, the start of that win streak with Sergio Pettis, who's now the Bellator bantamweight champion. Ricky Simone's always tough. And then how he handled Marlon Moraes, a former World Series of Fighting champion at that 135-pound division, and now a former UFC bantamweight champion. Like, Rob Font, to me, is definitely in the mix. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with this bantamweight title. Like, if Aljamain Sterling's gonna fight, I think obviously Peter Yan would have to fight for an interim title if it's in there. Or, like, I think Font's definitely made himself a player. Obviously, we have TJ Dillashaw and Corey Sandhagen coming up to be in that mix as well. But I don't think we can sleep on Rob Font. He's looked so much better, and he's really improved his striking and become a big player at 135.
He has, and you mentioned a lot of the things he was able to do in that fight there, and the things Cody wasn't able to do. So you really saw Rob Font able to really get his striking going, really sit long on Cody Garbrandt, use his jab. He was also patient, which is great. I mean, the fight IQ that Rob Font showed there, that I think some guys would have got, for better or for worse, like, let's say even a Corey Sandhagen, I think he may have gotten a little bit more antsy in that fight to go finish Cody Garbrandt, who was clearly just reeling the whole fight, backing up. I mean, it reminded me of a Tyron Woodley performance, honestly, of what is this guy doing? He's just trying to throw right hands off the fence here. So certainly Rob Font could have chased that finish a little bit more, but he stayed patient with it, which is smart because Cody always has that explosive power in his back pocket. So that was smart from Rob Font there. And you mentioned it also a little bit there. My next question of in your opinion, what's next for Rob Font? Because you do have Aljamain Sterling, who is the champion, but it wasn't without controversy that he won that title. So maybe Yan versus Sterling is next, or maybe Dana White in the UFC, maybe they choose to have a Font versus Sterling here, or again, Sandhagen, Dillashaw, they're already made. So this division a little interesting right now. What do you think's next for Rob Font, though?
For Rob, I think he has to kind of see what the playing field happens. Obviously, we know July 24th, we have the Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen fight, which Sandhagen wins that. I think he's also in the mix as well. And probably if they do the interim title, because we got to remember, Aljamain Sterling, sure, there's controversy or whatever, but he just had neck surgery, and you don't mess around with the neck, especially in this sport where, chokes and, guys take your back and whatnot. Yeah. So if Sterling doesn't fight this year, which, is a high possibility, I think, you really have a three-way dance in that situation of, Jan probably is going to be the next guy that would fight for an interim title because of how controversial that was. If Sandhagen wins, it's probably Jan and him. But for Font, I think you got to wait and see. I don't know who else you'd put him in. Or do you just, if you're Font, I'd kind of maybe sit back a bit because we've seen with Joanna Calderwood last year where she rushed herself, lost a title opportunity. Unless, a fight really made sense, but I don't see anything because Font right now is, definitely like a 1C in the bantamweight division for the UFC for fighting for a title, but still a lot's up in there. We're still waiting if Sterling's gonna fight, and a big fight coming up on July 24th, as I said, with Sandhagen and Dillashaw.
Yeah, and that's real quick before I get to the Garbrandt question I'm about to ask. Would you hate this? And I kind of like this a little bit. That would you hate Font facing the loser of Dillashaw and Sandhagen? Whoever loses that matchup gets Rob Font. Because either way, I mean, if Sandhagen loses, Sandhagen's still. I mean, you look at his career here. I mean, his loss is to Aljamain Sterling, right? So he's been at the top of the division. Dillashaw, we know what he's done in the division. So whoever loses that matchup, still a top bantamweight. Would you think that he is there? Do you think Rob Font would be up there and be able to face, the loser of Dillashaw and Sandhagen?
I think if it was presented with him, probably, because, I think the way things are looking, more people are, we can plan this out on paper, but more people are taking Corey Sandhagen just on the activity. And, there's a lot of unknowns of a TJ Dillashaw coming off a 2-year suspension and what he's going to look like now as a clean mixed martial artist. But I think you still take the fight because, one, you need to take a fight. And that's why Joanna Calderwood took the fight, because she needed a fight to make money. You can't just sit on the sidelines and rely that, there isn't as much sponsorship deal, obviously, with the UFC anymore. So I could see him doing it. And, if Font beats a TJ Dillashaw or even a Corey Sandhagen, it's not like he's beating a Can or anything like that. He's beating a top bantamweight in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's why I think it makes a lot of sense. And also, as you said, there's a lot of unknowns. We still have a lot of time until that fight. So obviously we don't want this to happen, but who knows injury wise, who knows in the COVID world we're in right now, if someone has to pull out of this fight, maybe Rob Font would take that fight coming up, in a couple months here. Who knows what would happen with the situation? A lot to play out there. Let's move to the Cody Garbrandt angle, though, Jason. And this one, Rob Font angle is very interesting, obviously, because the top of the division. But the Garbrandt angle, maybe even more interesting, just because he's still, at least last week, he was still in the top 5 of the bantamweight rankings. We've seen what Cody Garbrandt's done over the years of winning the title over Dominic Cruz, but then falling, drastically. Then he has the Rafael Assunção knockout. He looks like he's back, but he gets injured. He has COVID. Now he has this performance. So a lot playing out with Cody Garbrandt here. But in your opinion here, and this is one that I go back to Twitter the other night. Everybody on Twitter was talking about it. I think it's a fun question to talk about here of, is Cody Garbrandt finished? Just because, again, he's coming off of an injury. He's coming off of the COVID thing. You take yes, you have to put the Assunção win in his resume, but before that he had the 3 knockout losses in a row. So in your opinion, do you think Cody Garbrandt's finished, or even maybe not finished? Obviously, maybe he has some fights left, but have we seen the better days of Cody Garbrandt? Are those behind him right now?
We still have to, as you said, he had COVID. That's a big thing, and he had to shake off and while he was looking for the knockout, I thought he didn't fight in Cody Garbrandt's world. He didn't, get tagged and then figure, I got to brawl with this guy and then leave himself out there where, Font would have just put him away. He used his wrestling, I thought, well, to try to get the fight to the ground when needed to be. Is Cody Garbrandt maybe done as a top contender at 135? Maybe. But I still think, remember, he was supposed to go down to 125 and fight for the flyweight title, fight Deiveson Figueiredo for the flyweight title before he got, that injury and then COVID. And I still think flyweight is a division that last year really rose its stock, but it needs a name in there. And I think if Cody, he says himself, I was listening to an interview before the fight with Aaron Bronstetter of the TSN MMA show saying, I can make 125. I just have to diet a little bit because he's, he made weight easy 135. He eats whatever he wants there, and he can make he says he just has to diet really to make 125. And I think flyweight needs some names. And I think, after we get through Figueiredo and Moreno too, whoever wins that, I think if Cody were to come down, he'd be an instant like title contender in that division because you need some names. You know, Cody's a former bantamweight champion, and he just adds something to that division. I think I'm just more curious what he would look like at 125 because he's got heavy power. Not a lot of 125ers bring that. He's got, great credentials, and I think he'd be a big test, and I think maybe that's the division he goes to.
Yeah, I could see that happening too, and that's why this was an interesting fight. That it almost seemed like the UFC was saying, "Hey, you've had all of this going on with you. We're not going to make you diet, as you said. We're not going to make you cut weight down to 125. Let's just get you back in there, get you a fight underneath your belt here, a top guy in Rob Font. Let's see what you can do." So that would be very interesting to see him go down to 125. And we've seen with a lot of fighters over the years that you move down weight classes, your power translates even better. The guys that are hitting you there, sometimes you eat those shots a little bit better. And that was probably there was a couple positives from Garbrandt the other night. One of them was he was a little more patient. As you said, he continued to show that patience. He used some wrestling. He used some smart fight IQ, which I never thought I would say with Cody Garbrandt, but he is now. But also he ate some of those shots from Rob Font. And he was getting tagged a little bit. And, there were a couple times you could tell he was a little hurt, but he ate those shots all right. He didn't rush into the pocket when he was getting hurt. So, there were some positives there for Cody Garbrandt against Rob Font, and maybe he could take those down to 125 pounds. So I agree with you there. Let's move to the co-main event real quick, and then we'll get into the rest of some of the other action we saw this weekend with Bellator 259. But the co-main event of the evening, we had Carla Esparza beat Yan Xiaonan in what was just a bludgeoning. I mean, she went out there, used her wrestling, used some vicious ground and pound, gets the crucifix in the second round, finishes her with some nasty elbows, nasty cut over Yan Xiaonan's one of her eyes. Able to finish the fight. Carla Esparza looks like a bona fide contender right now. She looks like somebody who's going to challenge for the title soon here. The question just is, again, as it always is she going to get that shot? Is Rose Namajunas going to have that rematch with Zhang Weili, or is it going to be Carla Esparza stepping into this spot here? What are your opinions on that? Do you think Carla Esparza should fight Rose next for it, or do you think she's going to be on the back burner just for a second and then maybe face whoever the winner of the rematch is?
I think after that performance, there's really no denying Carla Esparza. Carla, original champion at 115 pounds in the UFC. And who'd she beat to get that title? She beat Rose Namajunas. So there's the intrigue there now of Rose's first title defense against the woman that beat her for the inaugural championship. And there's just not a woman at 115 that wrestles like Carla Esparza. 5 seconds in the fight, Carla just shot in for that double leg takedown because Yan was a little too aggressive, and that was the fight for Yan. 5 seconds of it being even, and then she just went down. Carla used her ground and pound. It may not be, the most entertaining at times, just using your wrestling and whatnot, but it gets the job done. And Carla Esparza, I think she's earned it more just on that performance. Yan's a really talented fighter and was on a very long win streak, something over a couple of years actually before being in the UFC and on her run. So I think you got to make the fight. There's the intrigue of it being Rose, and I understand people saying that Zhang should get it, but Zhang got finished in the first round. I don't understand this. We have to have an automatic rematch. If it was a close decision, sure, but she got finished by a head kick, a beautifully timed head kick by Rose Namajunas. I think Zhang has to have another fight before she gets back in the mix. I think it's Carla Esparza's time. She's supposed to originally was, I guess, laid out for having the shot against Zhang because apparently Rose didn't want the fight, and I say that with quotations. But I think you got to make the fight. Like I said, there's the intrigue of, this is a rematch for Rose. And I think it's just Carla's time, honestly. It's an interesting situation for Sucker Punch Entertainment because Rose Namajunas and Zhang, they're both represented by the same. Same with Carla Esparza now, but they're not obliged to having their clients fight each other. They've done it before. I could see them doing it again, and I think you got to reward Carla. Carla looked fantastic. That was the best Carla Esparza I've seen since her time on The Ultimate Fighter. She may have won some controversial split decisions along the way, but hey, she got the Duke, and she looked fantastic on Saturday night.
She did, and like you said, I think you have to reward her for that performance is the right word, and even more so because not only did she go out there and wrestle Yan Xiaonan, but she went out there and she looked to land some vicious ground and pound and finish the fight. And what does Dana White love? He loves when fighters go out there, entertaining, try to finish the fight, don't put it in the judge's hands. I mean, even the main event, there was a 48-47, right, for Rob Font versus Garbrandt.
Let's not talk about that.
Yeah, we're not going to even, I was like, I'm not going to even get into that today. There's not enough time in the day to talk about MMA judging, but Esparza went out there. The UFC loves to see that. She went and finished the fight. She should get rewarded. She should face Rose Namajunas next for that strawweight title. And then, make Zhang Weili, make her work her way back up. Again, she doesn't have far to go again, but make her, get a fight or two before she gets that rematch back, quote unquote rematch, if Carla Esparza, whoever wins that fight between Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza there. All right, let's get to Bellator 259. That was this past Friday night, of course, Jason. A pretty fun card there. We had in the main event the women's featherweight title between Cris Cyborg and Leslie Smith. Not very shocking that Cyborg was able to really dice up Leslie Smith in that matchup. Really looked good, but she showed some improved patience again. And we talked about Cody Garbrandt. Obviously, he lost, but speaking of patience, Cyborg, she's looking a lot more patient later in her career here. And is she facing the killers of Amanda Nunes right now, or even a Julia Budd when she first came into Bellator? Not necessarily, but still, she's showing off some patience. She's also showing off a lot of good grappling chops right now. She's trying to bank on some more wrestling. She looks to be fighting a little smarter. She looks to be fighting a little bit more of a, bringing more of a complete package to the table. Plus, she still has that striking all on the table. So my question to you, Jason, is this the best Cyborg we've ever seen? Because we've seen some great Cyborgs over the year, right? But is this the best Cyborg we've ever seen late in her career here, considering everything she's putting together right now?
I don't know if I want to say the best, maybe the most complete, because before, like in her Elite XC Strikeforce days, she'd just come out there and maul you and just be a hurricane of violence on you, and you really couldn't weather the storm. She's so much bigger than some of these girls, and she hits like a truck. But as you said, she's taking her time. If the fight goes to the ground, she's showing her jiu-jitsu, her wrestling, and getting herself in good positions. All in all, I just think she's a much more complete fighter. As you said, she's not fighting, maybe, an Amanda Nunes type or some of the competitors she fought, but I think she's just still a step ahead of everyone not named Amanda Nunes, really. She's really, a legend in the sport. And I don't know who you even have. Do you go back to a Julia Budd rematch? Because, there's some intrigue. It's the only thing competitive to, I guess, if you want to have a Cyborg fight again. But to me, the ultimate fight for Cyborg is if after this season of the PFL, they can sign Kayla Harrison, because that's a fight that they're both kind of angling for on social media. They're both in different companies. Obviously, Kayla's got to go win a women's lightweight tournament or try to win another $1 million. But I think Kayla would need a fight like that. And I think Cyborg needs a fight like that for competition, because Leslie Smith, one thing she showed in that fight, she's tough as hell. And that fight probably could have been stopped a little earlier in the 5th round, but she made it 5 rounds with Cyborg, which is a badge of honor in some way.
It is. There was a couple times in that fight where I believe it was the 2nd or 3rd round where she ate a nasty hook, and you could tell, her legs got a little shaky, but she stood there and she took it and she didn't go down, and that was really impressive to me. Leslie Smith, no shame in that performance. Nobody. Again, unless you're Amanda Nunes or somebody, just Nunes pretty much, actually, obviously. That's all it is. No one else is beating her. So the fact that she did go 5 rounds, I do feel bad that that really sucks for her, that final seconds of the 5th round there, she gets knocked out by Cyborg. But, no badge of honor there, as you said. That was a very tough performance from Leslie Smith. But Cyborg gets the job done. You mentioned a lot of points there I want to piggyback off of, including you said you put Amanda Nunes ahead of her. And I did want to ask you that question today, too, because the other night, Cyborg in her post-fight press conference was talking about, in order to be the GOAT, she called out Cat Zingano, which, okay, whatever. Cat Zingano is a name. They'll probably shoot for that fight. And then after that, maybe that'll be the end of the year. And then maybe Kayla Harrison does come over from the PFL to Bellator, maybe at that point. But she talked about, in order to be the GOAT, you got to face Cat Zingano. And I saw some other people, again, another Twitter conversation the other night of, would you still consider Amanda Nunes the GOAT now? Or would you, again, maybe put Cyborg back in that GOAT conversation? She's in the conversation, obviously, but after the Nunes loss, I think everybody just crowned Nunes as you're the GOAT, right? You are the GOAT. Would you be willing to entertain the idea now that maybe Cyborg, with some of the new complete package type of fighting she's doing now, would you consider her back into that GOAT conversation, or would she have to face a Nunes again, in your opinion, or somebody else? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. The GOAT conversation is always so tough, but I still think the best women's mixed martial artist right now is Amanda Nunes, because Amanda Nunes did something to Cyborg that no one even thought was possible, was dominate her in literally like 2 minutes. Like, no one thought that could happen. And, just the wins, like, and how Nunes is getting it done. Like, she just dominated Megan Anderson. She's had 2 close fights against Shevchenko, but she's won those fights. Manhandled Felicia Spencer. Like, she's just gone out there and wrecked shop against everyone. And sure, Kat Zingano, a name that I guess Cyborg needs to fight because they're in the same promotion, but I don't think that really lays any, track record against Cyborg or against Amanda Nunes. Amanda's the queen of mixed martial arts in the women's side of things. And, Cyborg, when it's all said and done, if there was a legit building for MMA Hall of Fame, instantly first ballot Hall of Famer for what she's done. She does have maybe some questions with, that steroid suspension and stuff like that. But now, like we said, she's a complete fighter, but you can't really, got to use the MMA math here. It doesn't really work out sometimes, but Amanda Nunes dominated Cyborg back in the end of 2018, so I'd still put Amanda ahead of her.
I would agree with you, and I've been saying today that I think that if Kayla Harrison comes to Bellator, and if Cyborg is able to run through her, buzzsaw through her, even maybe get a victory, I do maybe entertain a little bit more of that Cyborg GOAT conversation. And I do think it's fun to talk about it, though. As you said, I mean, MMA math, you could put all of this together. I do think it's fun, though, because and honestly, the fans were robbed a little bit that we don't get Cyborg versus Nunes too, at least for right now, right? And if they ever do fight, they might be both older at that point. Who knows? I mean, Nunes has talked about walking away from MMA at times, and Cyborg, if she dominates Kayla Harrison and has nobody else to fight at some point, I mean, maybe Cyborg retires too. So it's a travesty. I want to see that second one. Nunes dominated. I think she's the GOAT right now, but I would love to see that second matchup now. I don't know if it would go any different, but just the way Cyborg is fighting, I would love to see that second matchup someday, possible if we get it. But the GOAT conversation, very fun there. And, we'll stay in that featherweight division, and we'll kind of just group it in with the UFC's featherweight division here, Jason, that, you look at the women's featherweight division of the UFC. We just saw Norma Dumont on UFC Vegas 27 face Felicia Spencer. Spencer one time fought Chris Cyborg. Dumont gets the win. There's really no future, right, in this division in the UFC right now. I mean, Megan Anderson, for all intents and purposes, cut by the promotion. Now we'll see what they do with Felicia Spencer. Norma Dumont, there's talk that she's going to go back down to 135, or, even if she did stay at 145, well, maybe there's one matchup with Amanda Nunes. That's it, right? So, I mean, do you think the UFC's women's featherweight division, do you think that's going away? Do you think that's a thing that's going to be? Because the UFC so far has been kind of, hey, we don't know what we're doing with it yet, but that could just be because they're trying to get a couple fighters their final fights in their contracts.
Sure, but I mean, they could have those fights at another weight class. Like, we haven't heard anything about women's 145 since they announced that Felicia Spencer fight, and now that just happened. Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure Megan Anderson said that when she got cut that they were getting rid of the division. And it seems pretty much like that. Like, there's no one really in the ballpark to taking a title off Amanda Nunes at women's 145, and it's not like you're going to miss out on seeing Amanda Nunes because she's also the women's 135-pound champion. Yeah. So you'll get some fights there. There's more women in that 135-pound division. Like, the 145-pound division was really a division for Chris Cyborg because she couldn't make 135, and UFC hates catchweights, so they didn't want to do 140. So now you created that 145 division. That division was so marred and just awful from the start. Like, you had Geronda Randamie win, and then she doesn't want to fight Cyborg, so she drops the title, and then we get Cyborg as the champion, and then Nunes is the champion, but then just runs through everyone. Like, there's no competitiveness in that division. So if it seems to me, obviously, UFC hasn't made an official statement, but that division's dead in the UFC. You have enough women to focus on at, from 115 to 135 on. You really don't need 145. But if I'm like Bellator, I'm scooping up so many women's 145ers and trying to make that a marquee division. Like, I don't know why they haven't been doing that. I know they've been on a signing spree, and maybe you're waiting for some of these girls' contracts to be up from other promotions and whatnot. but you need to find a way to get more women's 145 pounders in there, because you can kind of make that a marquee division that the UFC doesn't have.
Exactly. And I was just about to say that. That was actually my point. You took the words right out of my mouth, that the big winner out of all of this is Scott Coker. And Scott Coker talked the other night after Bellator 259 that he's had many women call him up and say, I want a shot at Cyborg. And I wonder who those women are. Maybe it's Megan Anderson. Maybe, as you said, it's some of these other fighters who, if they can't drop to 135, they don't want to drop to 135, or they're getting cut by the UFC, they could go to Bellator. So like you said, I mean, Bellator could have, and they have a huge investment there, obviously. They went out, that was one of the marquee people they went and got was Cris Cyborg. So they need to make sure that division stays stacked and they keep having opponents for her, because a Kaylin Harrison matchup may come and go, and then what, right? Maybe Cyborg still wants to fight. And I mean, as interesting as maybe a Leah McCourt matchup is someday, she's got a while before she's going to be able to even compete with the Cris Cyborg, or even a Janae Harding, who looked okay on the feet against Leah McCourt the other night. So I would agree with you. I think that's Scott Coker is the big winner of this one for Bellator, if they can get some of these women like Megan Anderson, maybe Felicia Spencer, over there into Bellator and face Cris Cyborg at some point here. And Jason, just one more Bellator 259 point real quick, and then we'll get into some general MMA stuff, some general fight stuff. But Austin Vanderford the other night, he gets another win over Fabian Edwards. The middleweight division kind of interesting in Bellator right now, that it was assumed that Gegard Mousasi and John Salter were going to fight each other later this summer, and it still might happen, but it was kind of interesting that afterwards, Scott Coker seemed a little, not hesitant to say it, but he almost seemed as if Mousasi versus Salter might not happen, actually. It was kind of puzzling, actually, and this could just be negotiations, we don't know, but if, in fact, Mousasi doesn't face Salter, for whatever reason, maybe Mousasi's injured, I have no idea what's going on, would you want to see Vanderford face a John Salter, or vice versa here? Let's say Salter, something's wrong with him. Would you want to see him face Mousasi next for that middleweight title in Bellator?
I mean, I guess. Vanderford's looked good. He's, a guy that UFC missed out on the Contender Series that they've done well with. Mm-hmm. He looks great at middleweight. I don't know. I just think, right now, if he were to fight Mousasi, I think that'd be a little bit too much to bite off. Like, John Salter, I think, is a fine fight for him, but Mousasi, a little bit too much right now. But, I mean, they're building him up well. I mean, he's had some bad luck with, named opponents maybe falling. I know he was supposed to fight Chris Curtis before Chris Curtis got COVID, and then I don't know why Bellator didn't bring him back. That's a guy I think Bellator really needs, because he can fight in, welterweight, middleweight, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think, they're doing well with Vanderford. I think he's definitely put himself in the mix. And you don't see many people dominate a Fabian Edwards like that. So I'd put him in the mix. I don't know if he's next in line for the title shot, but he's definitely inching closer to it than most fighters.
Yeah, I agree. And, I don't necessarily want to see it yet, just because I actually really like Austin Vanderford's game. I think he does a lot of great things. He's very explosive. His wrestling, his jiu-jitsu, all of that, very good. I actually think his striking is improving, but the striking's still a little too rough for me to face someone like a Gegard Mousasi, or even someone like John Salter right now. I mean, maybe more on the Salter level, but I think I want to see I want to see maybe one or two more fights for Austin Vanderford before he gets that middleweight title shot in Bellator. But it'll be interesting to see what Scott Coker does with that division. As I said, was a little hesitant to name something coming up later this summer, but we'll keep everyone informed right here on the Man in the Cage podcast. All right, Jason. And again, you can go check Jason out on Twitter at JHagholm1. Go follow him right now. Jason, just a few more for you, and then I'll get you out of here. Few general ones. We saw a couple weeks ago, UFC 262, Charles Oliveira, he beats Michael Chandler, gets the lightweight title. That lightweight division, I don't want to say it's interesting, because I think you can kind of put the pieces together of what's going to happen next, of, who could face Charles Oliveira, but who do you want to see Charles Oliveira face next? I mean, because this is an interesting one too, that a lot of people think, hey, if Dustin Poirier wins, he should face Charles Oliveira, which he probably should definitely 100% do that. But if Conor McGregor wins, beats Dustin Poirier in the third matchup, some people out there are kind of hesitant to say, oh no, Conor shouldn't be in that matchup. But in my opinion, McGregor should be in that matchup, though. If he beats Dustin Poirier, I do think it should be McGregor versus Oliveira at some point here. If he's able to beat Dustin Poirier later this summer. Do you see it that way too? Or is there some sort of other name in this division that you want to throw out there that you'd be willing to entertain? I mean, maybe you would entertain a Beneil Dariush at some point, but Dariush said he's going to take a little time off. So I don't think that's a possibility. Chandler already lost. He said he might want a rematch. He's not going to get it. So that's got to be it, right? It's just whoever wins Poirier McGregor is going to fight Oliveira, right? That's got to be the lightweight title shot or lightweight title fight in the future here.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think if you're Charles Oliveira, like you're in the sweet spot because you're either going to fight, you're defend your title and make the most money, especially if it's Conor McGregor that comes out on July 10th and beats Dustin Poirier. Like you're the guy that in all planning of how this division kind of was mapping itself out at the beginning of the year, you were kind of put on the back seat. Like I was more than thrilled, but also shocked that they went with Oliveira versus Chandler for the lightweight title being vacant. I always thought it was going to be, Gaethje back in there and Chandler, which now that fight's looking like it's going to happen, which I'm just happy with in general because I feel like if you're bringing in Michael Chandler, please just make that fight happen. But Oliveira is going to, defend his title against either Poirier or McGregor. I don't understand this logic that if Conor wins against Poirier, he shouldn't get the title shot. Look, he's the biggest star in the sport. Yep. And anytime you can put him in a title fight, he raises the stock more so, I guess, of the pay-per-view, and he raises the stock of his opponent. So, Oliveira is going to be stoked about that, and I think it would be really rewarding because, Oliveira, if he's called out McGregor before, it was such a long shot, and now it's so close to being a reality. But as you said, things will play out. But, I mean, obviously, if Poirier wins, he has to get the title shot because people thought he should have fought for the title a couple weeks ago at UFC 262, but he, did the smart thing. He took the money over the title, and potentially he could now take the money and then eventually take the title towards the end of the year.
I agree with that, and everything you said there. I mean, McGregor, he's the biggest star in the sport, and that's why and his resume speaks for itself. And that's why even when people had an issue with Michael Chandler fighting Charles Oliveira for the title, I never understood it. Yes, he didn't do it in the UFC, so I understand some of that argument. But at the same time, though, Michael Chandler's resume spoke for itself. It's the same thing with Conor McGregor. Has he won a ton in the last couple years here, a few years? No, but he's still the biggest star in the sport. He still has a massive resume. If he beats a guy like Poirier, which we'll see because that Conor we saw was, he wasn't the worst fighter we've ever seen, but it definitely wasn't very good. We'll see what he can do later this summer. But if he's able to beat him, yes, I think he should get the title shot and vice versa. Again, Dustin Poirier, who maybe should have already even fought for the title. Had it not been for the McGregor Poirier trilogy fight that he had to take here. I mean, if he didn't take it, the Diaz-McGregor is probably going to happen at some point, the trilogy. He probably wasn't going to get his trilogy fight, so I understand why he did. But if Poirier does win, obviously he gets that next title shot in that UFC lightweight division. An interesting one. I mean, we even have matchups like Kevin Lee being announced now versus Sean Brady. Obviously not, one that would impact the title shot here, but a lightweight division, a pretty interesting one in the UFC and some fun matchups down the road here. But curious to see too, Jason, that you have Tony Ferguson who's floating around at number 6 still, he's on a 3-fight losing streak. Have RDA there, Dan Hooker, Paul Felder just retiring again on the UFC Vegas 27 broadcast. So we'll see how that UFC lightweight division takes shape even a year from now, which could be very, very different. Just a couple more for you, Jason, then I'll get you out of here. Let's move to the boxing world real quick. One that's really taking a hold of the boxing community, just boxing talk in general, that Tyson Fury, who was going to fight Anthony Joshua probably later this summer, August, September, they were talking about. That fight not going to happen now because an arbitrator ruled that Deontay Wilder, he gets a rematch against Tyson Fury, which is very interesting. And there's so many different levels to that of, is this the issue with boxing a lot of times that you do have an arbitrator here ruling this when the fans want Joshua versus Fury right now? I mean, that's just what the fans want, as it should be. I mean, he knocked out Deontay Wilder. The first matchup, argue that he beat Deontay Wilder that time. So very interesting there. But, just what are your thoughts on this whole thing? I mean, is this, are these the issues with boxing that keep creeping up? And then also in this rematch here, I mean, do you want to see this again? I mean, do you have any interest in a rematch here, Wilder versus Fury? And also maybe a quick prediction, who you think is going to take it this time around?
Well, as always, boxing politics are going to boxing politic.
Yeah.
Nothing in boxing can ever be super easy to do. Like,
Yes.
everyone was so excited that we're finally going to have like a true, like, undisputed heavyweight champion in Fury and Joshua. I mean, with the biggest fight in the history of like English or modern English boxing, where
Yeah.
the sport was invented. But you know what? All in all, well, we have to now live with this arbitrator ruling that we're gonna get Wilder Fury 3, and we're gonna get this Usyk Fury fight, and hopefully they can line them up on the same day. I know we do know that, as Fury did announce on the Top Rank show on Saturday, that it's gonna be the third fight with Deontay Wilder, July 24th, which I believe it's in Vegas, where at Allianz Stadium where the Raiders play. All in all, like, we got to live with it. Is there a chance that Wilder can knock him out? Yes, but I still think Fury's got the game plan, and just his quotes of where there could have been step aside money given to Wilder. He wasn't going to pay him a cent. He's going to pay him in ass whoopings. I like that motivation, and I still think the way these talents in Fury and Joshua, I still think they'll find ways to get through their opponents. I'm still not going to count out an Usyk or a Wilder, especially a Wilder right now, because I've seen some footage from social media. He's looking in fantastic shape, and he's made some changes and whatnot, and will probably not wear a 40-pound outfit to the ring this time. But I still think that Fury and Joshua will win, and I think that sets up a kind of a perfect like end of the year, like December pay-per-view, like right around the holiday season, which I don't know, is always just a fun environment around Christmas time with a big heavyweight boxing fight and stuff like that. So hopefully that's the way it works out. Obviously you need those things to happen to have that, or else you just lose any hope of this fight happening, which is the risk you're taking in having this happen. But unfortunately, Top Rank maybe jumped the gun getting on this, not realizing the arbitrator was going to be in there, and he made this ruling, and now we got to live with it. But so third fight.
Yeah, third fight. Here we go. And that's just, again, I'm a boxing fan, but these are the issues that just keep creeping up over the years here. That you get issues like this. I mean, we talked about even Rose Namajunas, Zhang Weili. What you have to love about some of these mixed martial arts promotions, and again, some of them give rematches out a little too easily, but a lot of these promotions, though, they're not being forced by a governing body to say, hey, you know what? No, you have to go get a rematch there. No, we're going to make the matchups we want to make. Are we going to give you a rematch? Yes. If you go win a fight, if you do enough things, if you're patient, we'll give you another shot. But we're not going to just, have that immediate rematch. And that's the issue here, because do I want to see Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury again? Absolutely, I do. I want to see that matchup again. But I want to see it after Deontay Wilder, had he went and faced an Andy Ruiz or somebody else like that down the line that, get a fight underneath your belt, show that you can win again. And then maybe, if Fury beats Anthony Joshua, then we'll make that fight. Or, if Fury loses, maybe you still make the fight. Or then maybe you get Joshua Wilder. I mean, that's what I wanted to see, honestly, and we're not going to get that, obviously, and we'll see, though. I mean, we'll see if Fury can beat Wilder for a third time or a second time here later this summer, and in my opinion, I think he will. I haven't seen anything from Deontay Wilder that makes me think that he's developed a jab, that he's developed a lot of things that would help him set up that power. He's got massive power. Sometimes he struggles at finding a way to connect with that, though. Similar to even what we saw the other night with Cody Garbrandt of just throwing hooks. I mean, you can't just throw hooks. You got to find ways to set it up. Tyson Fury is a tough puzzle to crack, and I expect something similar coming up later this summer between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. And Jason, it's been fun having you on today, man. I do have one more for you real quick, and I lied. I'm actually going to jump back to MMA real quick and maybe put you on the spot just because I've seen a bunch of stuff popping up today about this, and it's been a whole saga of Joshua Fabia and Diego Sanchez. But Joshua Fabia going full scorched earth now, where Diego Sanchez has actually broken up with him now. The relationship is done there. They're no longer working together, which I think is fantastic. I mean, this whole situation was just so toxic all around, especially for Diego Sanchez, and just so sad to see his downfall within the UFC even there and within mixed martial arts. But do you have any thoughts on what Joshua Fabio is doing right now? That, he's coming out, he's saying that Diego Sanchez was told to throw the Michael Kaseya fight, and, saying all these different things and saying, all these conspiracy theories again. I mean, what are your thoughts on this whole saga? And, I mean, is there any way to shut up Joshua Fabia moving forward within MMA and combat sports?
The only way you shut him up is if you just keep ignoring him, because I think no one takes what this guy says with any validity. He's just throwing out takes to just, get headlines and whatever. Obviously, someone got into Diego's head, thankfully, and was like,
Yes.
this guy's going to hurt your career because, you can't, no one wants to take you because even
Yes.
Bellator, who normally would jump on a guy like Diego Sanchez, was like, we have no interest in him. PFL doesn't seem like they have interest. Like, the only option seemed like bare knuckle boxing. I don't know. Now that he's released himself from Joshua Fabia and all his weird tactics and just trying to start controversy and conflict with people for no reason. There seems to be an opening. Like, I could even right now see the UFC signing back Diego Sanchez for one more fight now that Fabia's out of the picture. But man, Fabia is literally a real life internet troll. Like, all he does is just say things to get attention, and no one takes what this guy says with any validity. He's just upset, obviously. So he's the loser in the relationship, and when you break up with someone and lose, you're just gonna say hurtful things and be mean about it and dig yourself more holes. And right now, Fabia's digging himself out of the MMA bubble, thankfully, because I don't think we need to see this guy in his McDojo tactics anymore.
We don't need to see him throwing strikes to a person suspended by their feet anymore. We don't need to see any of these videos. And I do think it's that with Diego Sanchez. I think what really probably clicked with him finally is, I bet after he got cut by the UFC, he went to Bellator, he went to the PFL, maybe even bare knuckle boxing. We don't know. Maybe again, bare knuckle boxing, desperate at times to get talent. Maybe they would have taken him with Fabia. But I think a lot of these promotions probably went to him and they said, we will definitely sign you. We will pay you. But that guy over there can't be here. We don't want to deal with that guy. We will sign you, Diego. We want you here. Even maybe the UFC did this again. Maybe, saying, hey, we'll sign you back, but that guy can't be here. And maybe that's what clicked with him finally, that, all right, just out of necessity even, I got to get rid of this guy. So glad Diego Sanchez is done with Joshua Fabia. Hopefully Fabia goes away here. I know Twitter suspended his Twitter account already. So
really?
They did, yes. They suspended his Twitter account. Yes, I saw that this morning that they suspended him. So Fabia no longer on Twitter, among other people in this world, and we're all better for it. He is Jason Hagholm. You can follow him on Twitter at jhagholm1. Again, Jason Hagholm, MMA journalist with the MMA Chronicles and The Scrap. Additionally, BTC Fight Promotions and the Kitchener Rangers. BTC Fight Promotions returns June 5th in Vancouver, BC. You can hear Jason on the call of that. Jason, it's been fun, man. I hope you have fun with the fights coming up, the BTC Fight Promotions on June 5th. Take care, man, and I'll love to have you on sometime soon here again.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jeff. Before I go, if anyone does want to see our show on June 5th, you can order the pay-per-view at btcfight.ca/live. The stream's there. The link, you can pre-order your pay-per-view now, and you'll get to see some young up-and-coming prospects coming from Canada as the scene is slowly getting back going here on the regional side of things in Canada. Thanks to BC for taking us. This will be our first show outside of the province of Ontario. But as always, Jeff, thanks for having me on, and look forward to talking to you the next time.
That was Jason Hagholm again. That was great stuff there. And again, BTC Fight Promotions, next card coming up on June 5th in Vancouver, BC. Make sure you check Jason out, and I'll have him on the show very, very soon here. Some fun stuff there. Had a lot of things that I actually agreed with. A lot of things on the Cody Garbrandt fight versus Rob Font, their futures, Bellator 259, some of the other stuff, the UFC's lightweight division, the title, the future of the title shot there. Agreed with a lot of things with him there, and I always love bringing Jason on. So thank you to Jason Hagholm once again for jumping on the program. All right, we're going to get out of here real quick. I know this has been a longer show today with the guest for a Monday show, including my 5-minute topics. So I'm going to go through my parting shots just real quick here, even quicker than I normally do. Parting shot number one, Paul Felder, he retires. I just mentioned it a little bit with Jason Hagholm, but Paul Felder, he retires on the UFC Vegas 27 broadcast. And after the fights, he had a little of a press conference afterwards, after broadcasting, being on that broadcasting team, that commentating team for UFC Vegas 27, talked about not wanting to be the guy over the hill, past his prime, still fighting. I love his logic. I love his honesty there. Paul Felder's had a fantastic career. He's had so many fun fights. He's been in there with all killers. Edson Barboza, Charles Oliveira. He's beaten Charles Oliveira as the current champion. Paul Felder has nothing to regret in his career. He had a fantastic career. He's stepping away at the right time. Could he have another fight or two and still be a competent fighter, obviously, and be competitive and even still win some top fights? Absolutely. But you know what? Father Time catches up with us all. So you never know. I mean, one day you're winning, the next you're not. And that's why Paul Felder's, this is a really smart move by him. He's got a bright future on that UFC broadcast, being a part of some of those commentary teams. So I like what Paul Felder's doing. Congratulations on Paul Felder on his retirement. I've loved his whole career. I've been a big fan a long time. So congrats to Paul Felder on the retirement there as he steps away from his fighting career and focuses on the next part of his career, broadcasting some of these fights. Parting shot number 2, I just mentioned a little bit as well with Jason. Kevin Lee facing Sean Brady coming up later this summer. That fight being announced by Brett Nakamoto from ESPN on Twitter the other day. Love this fight. I think it's going to be a fun fight. That Kevin Lee coming back from the injuries that he's had, coming back off of some of the disappointments he's had in his career. This is a big test for him. Sean Brady is really, really shooting up the rankings right now. Sean Brady really shooting up in his mixed martial arts career where he wants to get those rankings. He wants to get title shots. Big chance for Sean Brady as well. Big question marks here will be answered. Similar a little bit to the Edmund Shabazian, Jack Hermanson fight in different ways, though. You get Sean Brady, who's getting a massive step up in competition here, and you have Kevin Lee, who, let's see what he is after these injuries. He's been dominant at points of his career. He's been in there with killers as well. What happens in this fight between Sean Brady and Kevin Lee? It's a very fun fight, and I'm really looking forward to that one coming up later this summer. And then parting shot number 3, once again from Glove Talk. I mentioned it earlier, talking about the Josh Taylor-Jose Ramirez fight. And again, if you want to send any thoughts, questions, anything to me on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley, make sure you do so, and I'll read your question, your thoughts on the show here, as well as give you a shout out. But Glove Talk at Glove_Talk on Twitter. He asked me, number 1, who I think Josh Taylor should face next, but then he also asked who I think is going to win this weekend's matchup. There's no mixed martial arts cards coming up this weekend, but there's still some big boxing, and that's what I'm going to talk about at the end of this week. Normally my preview show will have a lot of MMA to go over. I'll throw the boxing in with it. This week it's going to be all boxing, though, because there's no MMA later this week. I might throw some things here and there still, as the MMA world's never stopped. The news machine never stops churning. There's going to be news going on. There's going to be things going on. But, still, so I'll throw some of those things in there. So it's just going to be pretty much boxing at the end of this week, which I'm excited about. A massive fight, too. And that was Glove Talk's question of who do I think is going to win between Devin Haney and Jorge Linares coming up this Saturday. This is a massive matchup. Both these guys, very tantalizing fighters. Devin Haney, of course, undefeated. Devin Haney's been thrown into some of the other discussions as well of who is he going to fight in the future. A fun, up-and-coming guy who can, face a lot of these other young fighters and have some super fights. So who do I think is going to win? I'm going to give it a bigger preview later this week. I'm not going to cop out totally, though. I'm going to give a little bit of one on a Monday here. Later this week, though, after I watch tape a little bit more, look at things a little bit more, I will maybe have a different opinion. But as of right now, I'm going to go Devin Haney still. I think Haney can get the job done. I think the fight is his. But Linares, that power he possesses, the experience that he possesses, it's going to be a very tough fight. I'm very excited for this one coming up this weekend between Haney and Linares. Going to be a fun one. Going to be a massive fight. I mean, we just went off of Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez. This is a very good fight as well in the boxing world, and I can't wait to preview it later this week right here on the Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. So whether you're into MMA, whether you're into boxing, make sure you keep it locked right here on the Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. All right, everybody, I'm done talking today. Between yelling at the Knicks game last night and talking for however long I've talked to now. I'll see once I put it all together between the interview with Jason Hagholm and myself talking. I'm done talking now. I'm going to go away. I'm going to go rest my voice here, rest up, and then I'll be back later this week, as I said, for episode 90 of the Man in the Cage podcast, breaking down, previewing all of that boxing content later this weekend, as well as some other stuff. Again, keep it locked right here on Twitter at Jeff_Brantley, on Instagram at Jeff_Brantley. I'll have content all week, videos all week. Going to jump on a YouTube live. If something happens in the MMA world, big matchup, any of that stuff, I'll make sure I'm talking about it. So keep it right here all week. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast on YouTube. Subscribe to it. That way you get the latest notifications. Go to the website, maninthecagemma.show, to check out the sponsors of the show. all that good stuff, latest episodes, videos. Go subscribe to us, follow on all the audio platforms, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on the audio platforms. And then meet me right here later this week for episode 90 of the podcast as we go over everything for Linares and Devin Haney, as well as some other boxing, some big boxing coming up later this week. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your week. Hopefully my Knicks win on Wednesday. Hopefully the Yankees continue to win. They did. I didn't even mention that at the beginning. I didn't want to bog you down with Jeff Brantley sports thoughts outside of combat sports, but the Yankees, they sweep the White Sox this weekend. If you didn't hate me enough for being a Knicks fan already, maybe you hate me enough now for being a Yankees fan. But go Yankees, go Knicks. Let's go into this week. Let's have a good week, everybody. And then I'll talk to you later right here on the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. Take care.